Airline Pilot Guy, episode 138.
Flight 209, are you clear for takeoff? Roger. LA, Illinois, 123.9.
Roger. Request vector,
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from my side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 708 in the Crown Plaza Hotel in Dayton, Ohio. In today's episode, stuck mics, tire failures, snippy pilots, plane collisions, and Ebola. So get all settled in, tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions. Electronic devices powered on. Flight 138 is ready for pushback. Well, hello and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show. As I said, I'm in rainy Dayton. Actually, it looks like it's clearing up a little bit. Again, I've positioned myself in front of my window here in my hotel room at the Crown Plaza, overlooking a kind of a nice little, I don't know, not forested area, but kind of a nice green area in the square or this city block, and looking at some of the old buildings here in Dayton, some with some pretty interesting architecture, kind of nice. And finally, it looks like the sky is starting to clear. When we came in earlier today, it was just a light drizzle and kind of a yucky day. But that's okay, because I've been spending the last several hours preparing for today's show. So, let's see. After my 2-day trip last week, when I recorded episode 137, I mentioned it on the last show that I was going to try to pick up some extra flying, and I was successful. They called up and said, hey, we have a 4-day green slip trip for you, an overtime trip, 4 days long. So I got double pay on that trip, which was awesome. So I went out on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Got back Sunday, early afternoon. And then, went to Mass with the family in the afternoon and watched the NASCAR Sprint Cup race, and had a great time. And then I was off on Monday and Tuesday, so I got a little bit of a battery recharge at home, and took care of some things that needed to be taken care of at home. And then left on this 3-day trip yesterday. We were flew into Bradley International and laid over in Springfield, Massachusetts. And then here today. 2 legs today, just 1 leg from Bradley to Atlanta, and then 1 leg up here to Dayton. And now you are all caught up. So, and at the end of this trip, I am not even going to go home. So tomorrow afternoon when I get into Atlanta, the plan is for me to jump on a jet to Los Angeles International and visit my mom on Saturday, and then fly back Sunday, and then go back out again on yet another 3-day trip, Monday through Wednesday. On Monday, I'll be in Orlando. I plan on meeting up with my son. He goes to school there. And on Tuesday, I will be in Miami in mid to late afternoon, and then home on Wednesday. So next week, I'm not sure if I'll be doing the recording of the show at home or on the road. We'll have to play that one by ear. So let's see. Without stalling anymore, I think we should get on, because this is going to be kind of a long show. I have a lot of great feedback and a lot of things in the news I'd really like to talk about, so it might take some time. So you better get all settled in and comfortable, because today's show is going to be one of those long ones, probably close to 3 hours. So, which means that, heck, I'm going to be hungry by the end of this and thirsty, and I hope I can make it all the way through without breaking, and then go and grab a bite to eat before I hit the sack, because we have to get up early again tomorrow morning. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and do this.
Johnny, how much more coffee?
No thanks.
Yes, it is the Java Jive. the Ink Spots, and you know when it was recorded, 1940. And it is my theme song for the Airline Pilot Guy Coffee Fund. What's the Coffee Fund, you ask? Well, just ask any of the people who have been listening for so many episodes. They know what it is. It is the way for you to contribute to the show if you feel like you want to. The show does have costs, hosting costs, both media and website, and equipment costs, etc. And also, I love drinking coffee, and so I have a fund for that. So if you'd like to contribute or learn more about the Airline Pilot Guy Coffee Fund, head over to airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. And since our last episode, we have Jeff. Thank you again, Jeff. He has a recurrent donation. And Raina or Rana, a new contributor, and I apologize for not properly pronouncing your name, or maybe I am pronouncing it correctly. That's why I'm going to say Raina or Rana, and maybe one of those is correct. So thank you for your very nice contribution, both of you. And again, if you want to learn more about the Coffee Fund, head over to airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. And thank you again to the Ink Spots, the Java Jive. And hopefully we'll hear another version of this later in the show for the feedback. All right, so I'm going to fade them out. And I'm going to head over here and press this button and press yet one other button, which means it's time for the news. Okay, let's start off with the thing that everybody is talking about, the news is talking about constantly, and that, of course, is the Ebola scare. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be covering this, because it has the potential for being quite a catastrophe if we don't get a handle on the spread of this deadly virus. For those of you outside of the well, you probably know. If you're anywhere in the world, you probably have heard that we had a gentleman here in the United States, in Dallas, Texas, who came back from a trip to, I think, Liberia, somewhere over in West Africa. Came into this country, went through, I think, Dulles International on the way to Dallas. And at the time that he went through the Dulles International Airport, he had no signs of the disease. He had no fever. He had, no symptoms, really. But he was infected. And that's one of the reasons why many are concerned about these so-called steps that many airports are going to take for people coming into our country, doing some kind of scanning for temperatures, fevers, that type of thing. But as they keep saying, well, if they had all those in place when Mr. Donovan came into the country, because he was not displaying a fever or didn't display any of the other symptoms, he would have gone through without a problem. So I'm not so sure what they're kind of putting into place is going to do the trick. And I'm hoping that we get a good firm grasp on what's happening here before it does become a catastrophe. So speaking of that, before I started the show, they were showing some dude or some people in hazmat suits on an airliner. And I thought, well, what's this? Apparently a flight, I'm not sure what airline it was, probably U.S. Air, but I'm not sure, a flight from Philadelphia, I believe, to Dominican Republic. Again, I'm not sure of all the details. It was such breaking news that I didn't even see it on any of my sources here on the computer. But I guess some dude decides that in the middle of this flight down to the Dominican Republic that he'll stand up, start screaming, and say, "I have Ebola." Okay, which freaks out everybody on the plane. Well, it turns out he thought this was a good idea. He was joking. He thought this would be a really good joke. Not a good joke. And I hope that he pays for this somehow. But apparently they were quarantining people and had the people in hazmat suits and everything else on the airplane. It was just a big mess. So shame on him for doing that. And the other thing, well, let's see, what was the other thing I was going to mention that I didn't really have in my notes because it literally was just happening as I started the show or recording the show. Oh, yeah. At LaGuardia Airport, workers for AirServe, the contracted company to clean airplanes for a certain major legacy airline, headquartered or operating out of Terminal D at LaGuardia, decided to go on strike because they're saying that there are not appropriate precautions to keep them safe because they have to deal with things like vomit and other bodily fluids sometimes they have to clean up on the airplane, and they're concerned that they may end up being infected by the Ebola virus. And I think that they have a legitimate concern. So I think this is just the beginning of more to come. So we'll obviously keep our eyes and ears open for anything else happening with that. But I have a clipping here. Flight attendants were told to be careful with bodily fluids as health officials continue to monitor passengers who flew on 2 planes with an Ebola-infected flyer. A flight attendants union has urged its members to be extra cautious handling bodily fluids. Say that 3 times fast. The Association of Flight Attendants warned its 60,000 members on 19 airlines to be on the lookout for passengers exhibiting symptoms of Ebola, which has killed thousands in West Africa. Oh, by the way, I'm hearing some motorcycle noises outside. You probably don't hear that, but I do. And occasionally, I think we're pretty close to a fire station here downtown in Dayton. So if they respond, I've already heard them respond a few times today before I started the recording. If that happens, I will say something about it because some people have said that, hey, I'm listening to your podcast and I hear these sirens and I'm driving in my car and wondering, where the sirens are coming. I'm, pulling off the side of the road. So I will be careful to let you know when there is something going on in the background that you might be concerned about, but it's actually here in this recording. So getting on with the article about the flight attendants told to be careful with body fluids, or bodily fluids. Persons infected with the Ebola virus may exhibit symptoms such as high fever, severe headache, nausea, and or abdominal pain, the notice on the union's web page says. If you observe these symptoms, report any concerns of a potentially infectious passenger to the captain and follow the reporting procedures outlined by your airline. Additionally, all bodily fluids should be treated as if they are known to be contagious. And I was just thinking of something popped into my head. This trip that I did on over the weekend, the last day on Sunday, the last 2 legs we flew up to Buffalo, New York, and then back to Atlanta. And the very last leg from Buffalo to Atlanta, there was a lady in the jetway who had gotten sick, had thrown up, and she said it was her migraine. And so I'm just reading those symptoms there. Getting sick, being, where is it? High fever. I'm not sure she had a fever. Severe headache. Migraine. Nausea. She had nausea. She threw up there in the jetway. Wow. And I had some close contact with her. So, hey, maybe I'll be one of the next victims of Ebola. Oh, no. I'm not kidding. I hope that I am. I hope that was just migraine and she just got sick. Oh, well. I'm not going to dwell on it. Hey, but if I do get sick and I die, it was nice knowing you all. Okay? And I hope that I need to figure out a way to keep these shows out there in case I pass away unexpectedly. Okay, well, anyway, enough of that drama. Let's talk about one more thing regarding Ebola. Another article, airport workers ill-equipped to cope with sick flyers. And as I said, that union or not union, but the employee group in New York at the LaGuardia Airport has gone on strike regarding their concerns about that. So that's enough. let's not talk about Ebola anymore, okay? Okay, let's talk about something pleasant, something positive. And that is, if you've ever flown out of Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport, just north of Miami in South Florida, you know that they've been working on a runway there on the south side of the airport for quite some time, I think 2.5 years now. They just opened it earlier last month, September 18th. And it was a commemorative flight flown by JetBlue, Flight 1028, on the 18th of September. And when I was first reading this and listening to the audio, I'm thinking, wow, what a coincidence. Flight 1028 is the first one to land on this runway, and it's runway 1028. And then I thought, wait a minute. Oh, they planned it that way, you idiot. Okay, well, anyway, I have a little snippet of the first flight. First of all, they're taking off from, 10 left, which is the runway we use day in and day out, or the reciprocal of that, 28 right. It used to be just 10, but now it's 10 left. So they take off on that, and they go around, basically like around the pattern. They find a hole for them to come back to the airport, and then they land on 10 right for the first landing of a air carrier on the new runway 10 right, 28 left. Okay, so let's listen to this. Hang on. You can't hear that because I didn't do this. You're going to be able to hear it better now. I promise.
JetBlue 1028, 12603, fly heading of 075, runway 10 left, clear for takeoff.
Hey, 10 left, clear for takeoff, heading 075, JetBlue 1028.
28, contact my departure, see you in a little bit.
Take over departure, we'll see you later, JetBlue 1028, thanks.
Hello, Tower. Hello. Acknowledges receipt of runway 10 right, 28 left.
Lauderdale Tower, good morning, JetBlue 1028, visual runway 10 right.
JetBlue 1028, Hello, Tower. Good morning. That's a news helicopter on station 1/2 mile southwest, altitude case here 700. Wind calm away 10 right, clear to land.
Okay, 10 right, clear to land. We'll be looking for the helicopter traffic. Thank you.
And then on board in the cabin of the flight as they land.
And ladies and gentlemen, JetBlue Airways likes to welcome you to Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport, runway 1028. Yay!
10 right, 28 left to be exact. So there we go. Some happy news. They're saying that this is right now they're at 60 arrivals and departures each day, and they're hoping to bump that up to about 100 inbounds and 100 departures per day. And right now they handle approximately 600 to 700 flights per day this time of year. Now, wait a minute. We have 100 coming, 100 departures a day. Now we're at 60 a day. Well, something is not really making sense to me right now, reading those two sentences. But anyway, they're increasing their capacity, and the possibility for delays is now going to be diminished somewhat, unless there's other situations to cause a delay, like weather situations, which would affect both runways, of course. The project only cost $826 million. There are 12 tunnels that run underneath the runway's 2 bridges to accommodate U.S. Highway 1, Perimeter Road, and the FEC railroad tracks. And the 17-inch thick runway required 535,000 square yards of concrete and 90 miles of cable for electrical and lighting, which I think that lighting requires electricity, so that's a little bit redundant, I believe. So there we have it. Congratulations, Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport, for now having a new runway 8,000 feet long. Okay, speaking of runways, some negative news. There was an incident on the 4th of October at Los Angeles International Airport. Let's listen.
Mixed Fleet
cross runway turbulence, runway 25 right, line up and wait.
Aeromexico.
25 right, line up and wait, make for 18.
Aeromexico 18.
Wind 090 at 4. At the shoreline, turn left, heading 210, runway 25 right, clear for takeoff.
Okay, the short line heading 210, clear for takeoff, runway 25 right, make for 18.
Okay, they're cleared for takeoff. They're rolling down the runway.
4422, cancel, takeoff.
Runway
25 right,
takeoff. Stop on the runway. Cancel the takeoff, 4422 on runway 25 right.
Line up and wait.
Okay, so Aeromexico is rolling down 25 right. They tell Southwest to get into position, line up and wait. And then actually, Aeromexico is still rolling down the runway, and they can do this legally. And Southwest is cleared for takeoff on the same runway. And then the tower controller notices something going on with the Aeromexico 737-800. And so immediately he gets on the radio and cancels Southwest flight 4418 or whatever he is, his takeoff clearance. And there's a lot of people talking at the same time, and that's why it's hard to hear what's going on there. But finally, I think they start sorting things out. So let's listen to some more.
Runway Southwest 4422.
4422.
do you require any assistance? Roger. We're calling the crash phone now.
It's affirmative, Aeromexico 01.
18, Roger, equipment on the way. Can I provide any assistance for you at this time?
Okay, Aeromexico 018, we are going to take off. We have a trouble with, we found a trouble with the tires. We'd like to check if there is no fire on the wheels.
Mexico 18, Roger. So 4422, do you have room to make a left turn back to Foxtrot and use runway 25 left?
Affirmative, we got the turn. We can make the turn to 25 left. Southwest 4422.
City Ops 22, are you on scene?
City Ops 108, confirm runway 25 right closed.
We're showing runway 25 right closed, and it looks like there's a possible fire on the, I can't tell which tire.
Roger.
Mexico 18.
Go ahead.
So are you able to change frequencies to 127.85, 27.85 to talk to the fire department?
127.85, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and fade that out. And they ended up having the fire department look at it. Basically, the number one tire just catastrophically failed. And the picture shows, and I'll put a link to the Aviation Herald article, and it has a picture there of the furthest left main gear tire, the number one wheel and tire. The tire is completely gone. The only thing that's left there is the hub, and that's kind of ground down a little bit too. And that's where the fire came. And so it was just the left main tire that shredded, and the gear did not collapse, contrary to so many of those professional journalists out there. The headline was, the Aeromexico had a collapsed main gear. Well, they didn't. They had a tire that failed. And now the interesting thing about this is that we are taught, at least at Acme, and I believe all the other major legacy airlines, and probably most of the airlines out there, that there are certain things that you perform an abort for, and we have basically two realms. You have the low-speed realm and the high-speed realm. And in general, I think with most airlines, they demark the point at which you are shifting from the low-speed realm to the high-speed realm at 80 knots. So anything that happens before 80 knots could be relatively minor, and because you don't have that much energy and speed going down the runway, you can safely abort and pull off to the side or whatever, stop on the runway and handle the situation. Once you get above 80 knots, now you're in this kind of critical area between that speed and your decision speed, your V1 speed, where you really don't want to abort at those speeds because it could be quite dangerous. And you could end up causing more trouble for yourself than if you just continue the takeoff roll. And in general, the things that we abort for above 80 knots are engine failure, any kind of a fire indication, like a APU fire, an engine fire, a fire in the cabin, fire. Let's see what else. Wind shear, if you encounter a wind shear event, or if the blanket statement, you don't think the airplane's going to fly. But a tire failure above 80 knots is something that we are trained to not stop for in that high-speed realm. Now, I've never experienced a tire failure myself. I've heard from other people who have that it feels like the airplane is crashing when one of the tires or more than one of the tires fail. And it gets your attention. It makes a lot of noise, a lot of vibration, and many people will think that the airplane's not going to fly, and they stop, they abort, and sometimes to a catastrophic result. In this case, he initiated the abort at a very high speed, 140 knots. I don't know what his V1 was, for the decision speed was for that flight, but it was a very high speed abort. But luckily, it's a nice long runway, and he got it stopped, and there were no injuries. So, the good news is that, it turned out well, but it may not have if it had been a shorter runway, etc. So there's a good discussion on the Aviation Herald article that I'll have in the show notes of people talking about, when you initiate an abort, why would you initiate an abort? For what? What kind of an incident or warning or failure or whatever. And so anyway, take a look at that if you're interested in this whole abort, go kind of decision making and what you would abort for and everything else. But in this case, the captain decided to abort, and everybody, and as I said, the fire department took a look. They put out, I guess there wasn't really a fire, there was just some smoke, and they decided that they could deplane normally without initiating an emergency evacuation and having people injured in going down the slides and that kind of thing. So there you have that. Let's continue here. The FAA orders airlines to replace cockpit displays on 1,300 Boeing airplanes, and this affects Boeing's 737 and 777 jets. Initially, and we talked about this a couple years ago, actually, and the FAA had recommended to the airlines with the 737s and the 777s who had the Honeywell displays to replace them, recommended it, didn't require them. And then finally the FAA said, you know what, we're going to require it. So when the FAA says you have to do it, well, then the airlines have to do it. And they have to do it within 5 years. The FAA said the display units were susceptible to interference from Wi-Fi frequencies. Independent tests conducted by the agency and Boeing both showed blanking on the screens when Wi-Fi devices were used near them. The displays are also susceptible to transmissions from mobile phones, weather radar, and mobile satellite communications. Weather radar, really? Why was this thing certified to begin with? If it's going to blank out when you turn the weather radar on. So a spokesman from Honeywell, Steve Brecken, said that no display units have blanked in flight due to Wi-Fi interference. And he goes on to say, the only known occurrence was during a developmental test conducted on the ground. We worked with Boeing and addressed any concerns in 2012 with new display hardware, he said. So I'm not sure exactly what was happening behind the scenes here, but the FAA basically said, well, you know what, I don't care. Yeah, none have failed in flight, but we're going to require people to replace these anyway. And this is only going to cost airlines about $1,000 each display, which will cost about $14 million in total. Yikes. Okay, you may have heard about this. An anonymous listener sent this to me, and he said, have you heard about the two Ryanair 737s that came a little bit too close, and they collided with each other. They touched one another. And let's listen to a little bit of the live ATC recording.
12, continue on to Alpha, hold short of runway 34, monitor tower 1186. Bye-bye.
On Alpha, contact 1186, Ryanair 812, thank you, goodbye. We actually need to go back on stand, Ryanair 812.
They have to go back to the stand.
812, are you on Alpha?
We're on Alpha, and we think we just tipped on the aircraft on our left, Ryanair 812.
We think we hit the aircraft.
812, just say again, you think you did what to the aircraft?
The aircraft on our left, Ryanair 812.
What about the aircraft on your left?
We tipped off it.
Not sure what she said.
Ryanair 812, confirm you think you may have collided with the aircraft on the left-hand side?
That's affirmative.
Roger, that's copy, stand by.
Ground Ryanair 65 November Delta 1.
Okay, there's more to this recording, but you know what? It's
Ryanair 65 November Delta.
not that interesting. They get the emergency services out there to kind of survey what's going on, and they determine that it's not that serious. And the left wingtip of Ryanair 812, when they were maneuvering, and I think they were going to a different runway, but they were in close proximity to another Ryanair 737, and the left wingtip, winglet, ended up slicing through a little bit of the right horizontal stabilizer / elevator on the tail, and kind of broke off part of the winglet and left it sitting there in the horizontal stabilizer, the right horizontal stabilizer of the other jet. So needless to say, both flights were canceled. The airport was shut down for about a half an hour or so. They got everybody back to the gate, and yeah, as I said, they canceled the flights. So thank you very much for the information, Mr. Anonymous. And let's see, some more audio. I apologize who sent. I think Mark Lebrowski may have sent this to me. I'm not sure, but regardless, apparently up at Washington National Airport, DCA, a Delta pilot gets a little snippy on the radio. Let's hear this.
American 322, caution wake turbulence for the landing Boeing 757.
American 322.
Delta 832, turn right at Foxtrot, ground point 7.
Stand by.
Delta 832, turn right at Foxtrot, ground point 7.
Delta 832, Foxtrot, point 7. Need to learn the rules there, babe.
You need to do what's told unless you want a phone number.
Wow, what's up?
Okay. So, what happened there, Captain Jeff? Well, the Delta flight 757 landed on runway 19, and during the landing, we're very, very busy doing things like trying to stop the airplane. It's not unusual for Tower to give us instructions as we are in our landing rollout. Apparently, one or both of the pilots of the flight took umbrage to the fact that the tower controller was giving them instructions at that phase of their transition from flight to being on the ground. And so much so that it sounds to me like maybe the captain made the snippy remark, "You need to learn the rules, babe," which was a totally inappropriate term to use. And then you heard the tower, another person in the tower, probably the supervisor, say, you know, you need to watch what you're saying or else you're going to have to call a certain number, and basically threatening them with violation. So let's break this down. So, Captain Jeff, what is the requirement for you if you are given an instruction during landing? Are you required to acknowledge it? And the answer is no. The FAA understands that we are very busy at that time trying to get the thing slowed down to a safe taxiing speed. And it's completely appropriate for us not to say a thing. In fact, many, many times when they do give us instructions, they say prior to giving us the instructions, no acknowledgement necessary or no readback necessary. Exit taxiway Fox 1 or whatever, and contact ground control 21.7. And in this case, it was just Foxtrot, not Fox 1. I don't know why I said 1. So Apparently, the guy that made the inappropriate comment is under the impression that he is required to acknowledge an instruction immediately and read it back. And I guess he's under the impression that the instruction is not even supposed to be given. And I'd say that he is wrong, in my understanding. Now, I did do some research to try to figure out where that was stated, because I do remember reading this or being trained on this. I don't know at what point in my career. I looked at the Aeronautical Information Manual, and I looked at a couple of the Federal Aviation Regulations. I looked at the Pilot Controller Handbook, several different places. I couldn't find a citation to tell you this is where it says you do not have to acknowledge or read back an instruction when you're in the middle of your landing roll or roll out. But I'm pretty sure that that's the rule. And I think in this case that the hothead who made the inappropriate comment was wrong. And he doesn't know the rules. But regardless, if there's a misunderstanding or whatever, you never should succumb to using inappropriate language or saying something inappropriate on the radio. So that is a lesson to be learned. And if I'm wrong, please somebody out there tell me. Or if you do know where it says, where it's written down in the rules where we don't have to respond, let me know, okay? Maybe I am wrong. Maybe I have an inaccurate understanding of the rules and regulations. Okay, and looks like finally one more audio to play, and this one involves a stuck mic. A stuck mic means that you make a transmission and then you think you have let go of the microphone button. You may still be pressing it, or that microphone button may still be stuck open on its own, or there may have been something in the cockpit that shifted over to a transmit switch, like on the airplane that I fly. The flight kit is over here on the left, and the interphone panel's over there on the left as well. And on that bottom row, there's like a toggle switch that we can use to transmit. And if there's something on the flight kit that gets shifted forward, it's possible for that toggle, that spring-loaded toggle, to get stuck in the open position. So we have to be careful about all the ways that we can initiate a transmission on the radio, that we don't keep it open. And so in this case, this was a WestJet flight, and I believe it was up in Montreal or somewhere in the province of Quebec, the French-Canadian province. And let's listen to a little bit of this.
373, line up 25.
On the flight 25, let's say 37.
Okay. They were given instructions to line up runway 25, and they acknowledged that. But did you notice that it never went to a different sound? It never went to a clear frequency sound? In other words, they made the transmission, but they're still transmitting.
1-1 set. With the throttle to go. Throttle down. Cabin notification complete. And just not switch to the continuous. Just transponders TARA. Putting up checklist, please. Just
597 ground 2919 Echo.
Okay, so they're doing the last portion of their takeoff checklist. They received instructions to go onto the runway, line up and wait. The preceding landing aircraft was still on the runway and toward the latter part of their landing roll. And so they're running through the last checklist items. Flaps are set to 1-1, and the throttles are aligned for auto throttles or whatever. I don't know. I don't fly an Airbus, so I'm not sure exactly what he said there. And let's continue.
719 in Echo Jazz, 597, good night.
Okay, anytime you hear that where there's that kind of tone in the background, that usually means there are a couple people, at least two people, are transmitting simultaneously. So that's your first indication that there might be a stuck mic. Okay, they're wondering why are we not being clear for takeoff? The guys in the cockpit.
That's true.
I have control.
You guys are broadcasting.
I can't take you seriously with that mic buff. It looks ridiculous.
Okay, they're just having conversation inside the cockpit. Apparently one of the pilots has a boom microphone with a big windscreen on it, or a mic muff on it, and it's very large, and the guy said, I can't take you seriously with that big mic muff. You also heard at that time there was somebody else saying, you're broadcasting or you're blocking the frequency. But they can't hear it because their airplane, their microphones, one of them is in the open position, the stuck open position, and they can't hear anything else because they're transmitting. They can't receive.
Yes.
You guys are broadcasting.
Okay, another warning to them from another flight. You guys are broadcasting. But again,
no, it's great.
They
High
can't.
fidelity, no.
They're still having a conversation. Probably wondering why they're not being cleared for takeoff. Now, at this point, I may have said, why is it we're not hearing the instructions to the other airplane that landed ahead of us? I'm not hearing tower transmit anything. I don't hear any other airplanes. That would be the point where I'd go, a little bell would be going off in my head. Maybe we have a stuck mic. So what I usually do in that situation is go from selecting the number 1 communication radio button to the interphone button to see if I can hear myself talking. If I can hear myself talking, the microphone button is stuck. Okay? But at this point, they don't realize it.
He's really trying to slow us down, I think.
Okay, he's really trying to slow us down, I think. Paranoia? They're out to get us?
Question 373, do you read the tower at all?
No, they don't. They can't hear you because... Hot mic. Or stuck mic.
He's French, so I wouldn't want to piss him off.
He's French. I wouldn't want to piss him off, is what he says.
We will never win that battle. Not here.
Almost sounds like he's Australian. Okay, so now they're talking about this relationship, I guess, between the French-Canadian province and the non-French-Canadian provinces, I'm guessing. I don't know. Apparently there's some friction there. They're thinking it's a conspiracy. They still haven't figured it out. 2.5 minutes later from making that initial transmission that they have a stuck mic.
Hello, Tower. Good evening, Porter 271. Wind clear, TRNF 25.
Okay, here comes Porter Flight something or other coming in for landing on the runway where they're in position at the takeoff position.
Porter 271, we have a stuck mic with an aircraft in position right now, so just continue to with the approach for now. Reduce right back to minimum.
Okay, continue the approach, but reduce to your minimum speed. Maybe these guys will get a clue, and they'll be cleared for takeoff. Nope, no clue.
Porter 271, unfortunately, pull up and go around runway heading 3,000 feet.
We'll go around runway heading 3,000 feet, 271.
Guys are sitting there. Hey, I wonder why that airplane's going around. Still no clue.
The ground up, maybe he's lost his tower frequency.
Okay, now he's thinking, okay, well, maybe they lost the tower frequency. Again, they're still not understanding that they are the ones that are causing the problem.
Ground 21-9, number 2.
Okay, so one of them goes over to 21.9, which is the ground control frequency on the other radio, and I think they finally sorted out. But an Air Canada flight and another flight, so 3 flights in total, end up having to wave off their approaches, go around, go out and delay and hold, whatever, until they get this thing cleared up. So that little mistake caused a big mess. Nobody got hurt, and there wasn't catastrophe, but it did cause a problem there. And I just wanted to play that just to remind everybody that if you are expecting to hear some kind of communication from air traffic control and you're not hearing it and you're not hearing anything else, check your mic to make sure that you don't have a stuck mic. Remember that episode with the Southwest Airlines captain talking about his dating escapades with flight attendants, and he said some very not nice things about people that he dates, especially flight attendants, all the time, transmitting it over frequency. Got in a little bit of trouble, so we had to be careful with our mics and our transmissions. Okay, that is enough of the news, and now, of course, it is time for the best part of the show, your feedback.
Captain, incoming message.
Thank you. All right, let's move over here to my inbox, and we'll start with Joel Plotnick. How are we doing on the time? Under an hour. That's good. Okay. He says to me, he writes, in the event of a loss of cabin pressurization at cruising altitude, how much time do you have to descend before passenger oxygen runs out? So, most modern airplanes now the older ones had oxygen cylinders, and usually a few of them, to provide oxygen to all the passenger oxygen masks in the cabin. And then there was a separate bottle for the crew oxygen system. Nowadays, most airplanes have the little passenger service unit oxygen generators. They're little chemical generators. So that little panel above your head, you know the spiel when they're doing the safety demonstration, that in the event of a loss of pressurization, the panels will open and masks will fall, and then you're supposed to grab onto the mask, and they always say, firmly yank it or pull it. And the reason for that is that the oxygen canister or oxygen generator canister up there is something that makes oxygen via a chemical reaction. And so when you yank on that, pull on that cord, it basically triggers the chemical reaction and oxygen starts flowing. Now the cockpits are still protected by the old way of providing oxygen via an oxygen cylinder, but in the passenger cabin you have those chemical generators. Those chemical generators get really hot. Here I pulled a little bit of information from Acme's manual for my airplane. The passenger oxygen system is supplied by individual chemical oxygen generators located at each passenger service unit, PSU. Warning: oxygen generators become hot when activated. The presence of a burning odor is normal during use. So if you're ever in an airplane and you have a loss of pressurization and you are using those oxygen masks in the back, you may smell a burning odor. And that probably is because of your oxygen generator, not anything else on the airplane, unless you're on the JetBlue flight in Long Beach. Okay. You know what? I meant to talk about that in the news section. Darn it. Why did I not see that? I guess I didn't prepare very well here, did I? Okay, well, I'm going to make it part of this feedback from Joel. Anyway, so basically the answer to your question, Joel, is that pulling any mask down in a unit activates that oxygen generator, and 100% oxygen begins to flow to all masks in that unit. A green flow indicator is visible in the transparent oxygen reservoir bag when oxygen is flowing to the mask. The mask supplies a mixture of pure oxygen and ambient air to the passenger. If the passenger oxygen is activated and a PSU oxygen mask compartment does not open, the masks may be dropped manually. Oxygen will continue to flow for approximately 15 minutes and cannot be shut off once activated. And once used, There is no further supply of oxygen available to that particular PSU. Okay, so the answer, 15 minutes. So basically, when those masks fall and people start the chemical reaction and the oxygen generator starts producing oxygen, you have 15 minutes. That's why we make a big effort to get to a lower altitude as fast as we can, so that by the time the oxygen runs out in your oxygen mask, we're now at an altitude that the partial pressure of oxygen is high enough to keep you from passing out. So, what was I going to say about the JetBlue thing? Well, I learned a little bit more about the incident, and there was a video that somebody, I think somebody sent it to me. Oh, you know what? We are going to talk about it in feedback. I was ahead of myself there. Sorry. So in just a minute, we'll talk more about oxygen generators and masks and JetBlue out of Long Beach with the engine failure or engine overheat. Okay. But first, we're going to hear something from Ross in England. Well, not hear something, but he writes, "First, I thought I heard you mention on a show that a pilot from another airline was occupying the jump seat on a flight you were on. Was I correct? Can crew from other airlines occupy the jump seat? What's the protocol here with airlines assisting each other in getting their crews to where they need to be?" Well, most airlines nowadays have inter-airline agreements that allow us to jump seat on other airlines' jump seats. Now, in general, and I know it's true at Acme, that if an Acme pilot requests the jump seat and a pilot from another airline also wants the jump seat, well, the priority goes to the Acme pilot. So we do usually have priority on our own airline's jump seat. But if it's going to be empty and another airline pilot comes up and says, may I use your jump seat? And then we look at all the required documentation, and we should say sure. And if there's a seat available in the passenger cabin, then we politely ask them to go back there and sit comfortably in the middle seat between two very large people, which seems to always work out that way. You're never next to extremely good-looking, skinny people, like models or something like that. At least I've never experienced that. But yeah, we have that privilege, and it's a great one, especially for commuters, that they know that if their airline isn't flying to that destination, but another airline is, that if the jump seat is available, that they can use it, and it's a great benefit, to be sure. So essentially, I myself, not my family and I, but just myself, if I want to go somewhere, almost anywhere, I can do it for free by flying on the jump seat if it's available. And the captain agrees to let me do it. Okay, so that's the protocol. Secondly, someone sent me this link, and I thought I would share it with you. It is a set of photos showing a journey in Singapore Airlines A380 Suites class, where a ticket is $23,000 a ride. Yes, you read that right. $23,000 US. And then he has the link to that, and it's a link to what it's like to fly the $23,000 Singapore Airlines Suites class. I didn't look at that link yet, but I will. I shall. And then finally, Ross writes, "Finally, I wondered if anyone listening to the show has flown the British Airways London City to JFK route. London City is an airport a few miles to the east of the center of London and has a much shorter runway than Gatwick or Heathrow. It's only 5,000 feet long as opposed to 12,000 feet long, which, as I understand it, influences which aircraft can be used. So British Airways uses an Airbus 318 for this route with just 32 seats, all business class. A 318 seems a small plane to travel all that way over the ocean." And then he sent me the link to the Club World London City. And they talk about the service, 32 spacious seats with fully flat beds, onboard mobile data connectivity, pre-clearance of U.S. immigration on selected flights, a dedicated support team for all your travel needs. Now, one of the things that I really don't get from looking at the British Airways site, they do say it's direct service, but for those of you who are seasoned travelers, you know when you say direct service, that is not the same thing as non-stop service. So guess what? I looked up on FlightAware, British Airways Flight 1, which is their London City to JFK service. And they go from London City to Shannon in Western Ireland and land there. That's about a 1 hour and 15-minute flight, something like that. And then they get off the airplane. They go through U.S. Customs pre-clearance, and then they get back on the airplane a short while later, and then they continue their journey from Shannon, Ireland, to JFK in the United States. And that's another approximately 7-hour flight. And so it doesn't go nonstop from London City Airport to JFK, the way I understand it. Now, I could be wrong about that, but I'm sure, well, I'm not sure. I think that the reason that first segment is relatively short is because of the short runway at London City Airport, 5,000 feet long. They're not able to carry all the fuel necessary to make it all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. But in Shannon, because they have a longer runway there, they can load that thing up with fuel and make the entire journey from there. So, interesting. And I'll have a link to the London City to JFK service in the show notes. And, if you're interested in flying over to London or back, I would imagine it wouldn't be very cheap. Business class, or maybe it's the same price as flying business class from JFK to Heathrow or Gatwick. I don't know. But it looks like a pretty spiffy airplane, and looks like you get some pretty nice gourmet food and have a lot of amenities, and you get a lot of attention from the flight attendant staff. And yeah, so it looks pretty cool. Now, some people have dubbed it the Concorde. What's the? I tried to remember what they called this thing, like the Concorde 2 or the slow Concorde to the United States and back from the United States. I don't know. I would imagine going back from JFK to London City, they could do that nonstop. I should have looked that up. They probably can, because by the time they get over to London, they burn through all their fuel and they have the tailwind, so the flight's probably only about 7 hours, maybe less, and they're light enough to land on that short runway in London City. I'm guessing. I should have looked that up for you, but I didn't. So interesting, Ross. Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't know they had that service. And as far as being small, the airplane, that really doesn't make a difference these days. We're flying, small narrow-body Airbuses. We're flying 757s, 737s on long-distance flights, ETOPS kind of flights. And everybody said, okay, we can do that. So it's a different time now, isn't it? Okay, Derek writes, just wanted to ask you a couple of questions regarding the JetBlue engine incident which caused smoke to enter the cabin and the crew released the oxygen masks. You said this was the wrong thing to do, yes. And another listener, Tyler, a purser, confirmed this, yes. But what if the cabin was full of dense smoke? What would be the procedure if the passengers were having trouble breathing? You still would not use the oxygen masks, Derek, because it is an extreme fire hazard. You don't want pure oxygen in a cabin when you have the possibility of fire. Let's see, would they use the oxygen masks then? No. I'm sorry, but people would just have to choke, I guess, on the smoke. Or maybe the last resort? No. As I put in my own notes, absolutely not. The oxygen is mixed with ambient cabin air and the passengers would still breathe the smoke. It's not like you're breathing pure oxygen because those masks bring in the ambient cabin air with all that smoke in it. And again, the danger of oxygen pouring into the cabin with the possibility of fire is way more serious than having trouble breathing. And then he continues, also on its final descent, I assume at this stage it was all under control, but I only assume. On the YouTube link, you can hear the cabin crew shout, brace, 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 for several minutes until touchdown. Is this normal to do? This even if the immediate danger has passed? If coming in on one engine, knowing that the other one was safe, would you still be required to brace? And then he put the link in the show notes here. I mean, in his email, and I'll put those in the show notes for you. And I'm going to go ahead and play the video as soon as the advertisement is finished playing. Okay, here we go. Here's the a passenger taking video. You need to watch this. It's interesting.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a right engine failure. Shut down the engine. We're headed back to Long Beach at this time. Please stay in your seats and we'll try and clear the cabin as well as we can. Thank you.
Okay, so there was the captain saying they're returning to Long Beach. Okay, you know what that is? At first I'm thinking, that must be a passenger trying to talk through their oxygen mask. No, it's the flight attendant trying to make a PA with her oxygen mask on. And you can't understand a thing she's saying. She's going to try it again. Stay on oxygen, no smoking. I think maybe she's walking up and down the aisles with a portable bottle. That could be what we're hearing there. Now somebody picks up the PA, a flight attendant.
No smoking. Stay out of the labs. Keep your seatbelt fastened.
Ah, that's what they're saying. Okay. Why anybody would smoke at this point is beyond me, but I'm not a smoker. Maybe in times of really intense stress, you just got to have that smoke, even though the cabin is full of smoke. Kind of weird. Okay, now they're coming in on short final. I recognize Long Beach, California. Okay, now, that you heard, brace, I think that was the co-pilot made a PA, but I'm not sure. But somebody said brace. Now I hear the other flight attendants yelling brace. Okay, they're probably about 100 feet off the ground right now. 50 feet. Touchdown. Okay, they're applauding. They're happy to be on terra firma. I see the control tower going by this window. Again, you got to look at this video. Okay, you can stop saying brace. Okay, people are taking off their oxygen masks, which they shouldn't have had on at all to begin with. Another announcement coming.
Everyone stay seated. Take a seat.
Flight attendants at your stations.
Wait for instructions. Take a seat.
Okay, so the captain made a PA and said, flight attendants, keep your stations.
In your seats with your seatbelts fastened until we have instructions from the captain.
Easy Victor, easy Victor.
Okay, now that is basically the cocking the trigger for an evacuation, letting the flight attendants know that we may be evacuating. But they are not supposed to evacuate until the captain makes an announcement and says, evacuate, evacuate.
Release seatbelts, come this way. Release seatbelts, come this way.
Okay, so the flight attendant initiated the evacuation. I never heard the captain say evacuate, unless for some reason that was edited out of the YouTube video. That could be. But in the YouTube video, the captain kind of prepared them for an evacuation, but he never actually commanded the evacuation. So that could be another error, and that's why they started evacuating. Now, I did have, I actually did all this work, and let me see if I can find it. Yeah, let me let you listen to what was happening with the cockpit crew and Long Beach Tower while all this was happening in the cabin.
JetBlue 1416, Long Beach Tower, runway 30, line up away, traffic landing, runway 25 left.
Line up only, runway 30, JetBlue 1416.
But this is before they took off.
Runway 30, clear for takeoff.
Runway 30, clear for takeoff, JetBlue 14.
Okay, they're clear for takeoff.
JetBlue 1416, contact SoCal departure, good flight, see ya.
Order departure, JetBlue 1416, so long.
Okay, so it must be the first officer's leg,
Chapter 96 Whiskey, hold over C7.
because that was the captain's voice.
JetBlue 14. Division runway 30.
JetBlue 1416, runway 30, clear to land, wind calm, altimeter 2989.
Okay, so time.
Runway 30, JetBlue 1416.
Okay, so some time has elapsed there on this recording that I have from the time that they took off, and Tower told them to contact departure. They were on their merry way, and obviously they had the engine overheat situation, the smoke in the cabin, and so now they're back around on approach at Long Beach, and that was their contact with Tower. And let's continue.
JetBlue 1416, attention.
JetBlue 1416 is on the ground.
Yeah, he can see that.
He will be evacuating.
Roger.
Okay, so in the co-pilot's mind, they're going to be evacuating. So he just told Tower, we'll be evacuating.
Tower, JetBlue 1416.
Okay, that's the captain now, his voice.
1416 Tower.
Smoke out of the right engine.
Okay, is there smoke out of the right engine?
Stand by. JetBlue 1416, appears no smoke out of the right engine.
All right, then we're going to if you see no smoke, we're going to cancel the evac and get the fire crew out here for us.
JetBlue 1416, roger, they got people already out of the, looks like people are sliding out the back already.
All right, they're going out.
So I don't know if there was a breakdown in cockpit to cabin communications here. Perhaps the captain actually did say evacuate. I don't know. But from that YouTube video that we were listening to, I never heard the captain actually say evacuate, evacuate. It sounded to me like it was initiated by the flight attendants. And the captain was thinking, wait a minute, hang on, let's make sure that there's a reasonable reason to, that doesn't make sense, a reason to evacuate, because a lot of injuries in these things occur during the emergency evacuation, not from the incident itself. So it sounds like he kind of has a change of heart. He says, okay, we're going to go ahead and cancel the evacuation, but it was too late. They were already out on the tarmac. So interesting. Again, I'm not sure what happened there. I can tell you what, though. It seems that a lot of things went wrong. The flight attendants going back there and opening up the passenger service units manually and deploying the oxygen masks was clearly just a really, really, really bad error. They should never have done that. And it sounds to me like they may have been panicking a bit. But again, I don't know. I wasn't there. Don't want to cast aspersions or pass judgment on them, but I hope that we find out eventually. Okay, Terry writes, I saw this article, and one part made me think of your comments about hand flying versus autopilot use. I've included a link to the whole article, which itself references another piece which I couldn't easily find. The relevant part, though, is this. Okay, here's a quote from this article, and this is from Flying Magazine. As you probably know, every major airline and lots of the not-so-major ones capture flight data and use it as part of safety reporting programs. Pilots refer to them as snitch systems. I've never referred to it as a snitch system, but maybe some pilots do. Anytime there's a deviation of any kind, the system automatically reports it and, understandably, identifies the pilot behind the misdeed. Not every mistake or oversight is going to get you busted, but there are a lot of them that will. Some will get you fired. The fairness of such a system is open to debate, but the effect isn't. Okay, what he's referring to, the snitch system, is this system that some airlines participate in through or with the agreement or through an agreement with the party representing the pilots, usually the pilots' union, to have a system called FOQA, F-O-Q-A, and let's see, what does that stand for again? Flight, I've already forgotten, flight operations, something, Let me do a quick search for what FOQA means. I thought I knew, but I don't. It stands for Flight Operational Quality Assurance, and it's a voluntary safety program designed to improve aviation safety through the proactive use of flight recorded data. And the big thing about the airlines allowing us to sign off on its use is that there is confidentiality. Provides that the identity of individual crew members cannot be associated with any FOQA data, except for the purposes of crew contact as provided for in the plan. Anonymity provides that any identification of airline flight and/or flight crews with specific FOQA flight data necessary during an analysis is eliminated permanently at the earliest possible time and in accordance with the Pilot Association Agreement. Data access and control identifies data that require protection and assigns overall responsibility for data protection. In addition, data access and control provides guidelines and procedures to protect data, provides authorized access to data, data processing and storage locations, provides authorized access to reports and other data, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. The only time that you may be disciplined or fired or have anything very, very bad happen to you from a snitch event or a FOQA event is if you did the bad thing deliberately or it was a criminal act. Those two things will not protect you, and your being anonymous is not going to hold up. Okay, so in that case, if it was a deliberate act or a criminal act, the company will say, sorry, but we are not going to defend you to the FAA, and the FAA can do whatever they want. So that's the only time that I know of that you can get fired or get disciplined in some way. Okay, so the writer of this article, I don't think quite understands how this whole system works. And basically, in today's modern airplanes, these flight data recorders record many, many different things. Airspeeds and configurations and all kinds of data. You know, it could be hundreds of data points, it could be thousands or tens of thousands. And there are certain things that happen that trigger FOQA reporting. So and it depends on the airplane, it depends on the airline. But for instance, if for some reason you get an overspeed warning, that's generally considered a FOQA event, and it's going to be registered. And so the people that administer this program are going to receive the fact that ship number so-and-so on this date and time exceeded this parameter. They oversped the airplane. And then they're going to look to see if the crew put in some kind of an ASAP report, some kind of a report documenting it and explaining what happened. And in many cases, nothing will happen to the crew. They'll learn something from it, and it'll be a data point for safety. That's just one example. Unstabilized approaches. Again, the initial data is associated with the pilot crews because they need to contact the pilot crews to ask them about the event and learn more from it. Sometimes extra training is required, etc. But you're never going to lose your license. You're not going to get fired. You're not going to have time off without pay, because that's part of the integrity of the system. Again, unless you're doing something, you're up there and you go, you know what? I've always wanted to do an aileron roll in departure. I'm going to do one today. Well, sorry, that is a deliberate, unsafe act, and some people might even consider it criminal, and you're not going to be protected. Okay, so it doesn't protect you for everything, but most things it does. And the point of it is that we learn things from things going wrong, and we try to make the system safer. So that is the whole FOQA program, FOQA, Flight Operational Quality Assurance, or as the writer said in the Flying Magazine article, the snitch system. So let's go on with Terry's feedback. As with most things, you've probably already discussed this. Well, really, I haven't, and may have already seen this article. I have not. I'm running about an episode and a half behind. But if not, perhaps you can talk a little bit about the snitch systems. Oh, I just did. And any perspective you have on them. Do they have such an unintended impact? No. Or is it really just not something most pilots even think about? Yeah. I think in the back of our minds we're thinking about it, because there are certain things like, for instance, at my airline, a FOQA event is generated if you start taxiing before you have extended the flaps. It's a big thing at Acme that we are properly configured for, at least our flaps are properly configured for takeoff before we actually, after our pushback is complete, we have the engine started and about to taxi. We have to have those flaps out at some setting. And I think at some figure like 5 knots, the FOQA system goes, oh, okay, you've triggered the at or above 5 knots trigger. Now let me see if the flaps are in the takeoff position. If they are, then no FOQA event is generated. If they are not, then a FOQA report is generated. Same thing with stabilized or unstabilized approaches, overspeeds, that kind of thing. Those are just 3 examples of events that can trigger the system. Okay, so bottom line, it's there for safety, and in general, unless you're doing something deliberately wrong, or criminal, you're going to be okay. All right, let's go on with this.
Hi, Captain Jeff. This is Ray Williams from Alpharetta, and I've been away in Europe for a month and just catching up on the recent Airline Pilot Guy episodes. I've got a couple of questions, and coincidentally, they both involve the center of gravity. The first was APG 133, where you spoke about the Oz 737, where they loaded a bunch of kids in the back and the pilot set the trim incorrectly because of the incorrect weight estimates and had a bit of trouble getting the nose up. As I might have mentioned before, I was a Pan Am brat. My mom worked for the airline, and growing up, we got all the company newsletters and newspapers and stuff. And during the 60s and 70s, when Pan Am was operating their 727 shuttle service from Frankfurt am Main to Tempelhof in Berlin, they wanted a pretty quick turnaround at Tempelhof. And I remember reading in the company newsletter at the time that the 727s had strain gauges on the legs of the main undercarriage and nose wheel. And the readouts from these would be displayed in the cockpit, enabling the pilots to calculate very accurately the center of gravity. If that technology was available in the 70s, how come it's not used now, at least as a check? for the weight and balance documentation handed in by the dispatchers or cargo loaders or whoever does weight and balance. I just think it would be a check. You know, if the two calculations varied wildly, at least they could go back and say, hey, you know, either the strain gauges are wrong or the weight and balance figures are wrong. And my other question relating to center of gravity was Josh mentioning that sitting in the back of Mad Dog, he felt the control inputs from the rudder a lot more decisively. And that got me to thinking, the yaw on an aircraft should act around the center of gravity. Now, on a normal, 757, 767 kind of aircraft, okay, your center of gravity is quite far forward because your wings are forward and the engines are forward and everything like that. So therefore, yeah, you're going to feel the control inputs at the back of the aircraft and probably less at the front. Now, in the Mad Dog, the center of gravity is way back because the engine's in the back, all the big weights in the back, and thus the wings are in the back. So, to my mind, if the rudder input is acting on the center of gravity on a Mad Dog, surely up in the cockpit you would feel it worse because the moment from the center of gravity to the cockpit is way longer than from the center of gravity to the rudder. Now, I know that that's not factual because now that I pay for my own tickets, I tend to travel in the back. But even so, I'll be up in the first two rows of economy on a Mad Dog, and that is way forward of the wings, and you don't feel the control inputs from the rudder there. And it just, my experience and my senses don't kind of match up. One says, yeah, the front should be swinging wildly because of the moment, and the other says, but it doesn't. So maybe you can clarify what's going on there and what I'm missing. And finally, Captain Jeff, I'm attaching a link to a video of what can happen if your center of gravity moves aft of your landing gear. Have a good day. Fly safely. Cheers.
Cheers, Ray. And just a reminder, Ray has volunteered to orchestrate the APG meetup in Atlanta, and don't have any news yet regarding where we're going to go, but again, tentatively planned for the 18th, which is a little bit more than a week from now. So hopefully we'll have some news regarding that sometime soon. And again, if you're interested in attending a meetup in Atlanta, please contact Ray at, Ray APG meetup? Shoot, I should probably search for it. I'll have that in the show notes. Look in the show notes. You'll see the email to find out more information and express your intention of participating in the meetup on the 18th to, I think it's Ray APG meet, MEET, at gmail.com. But I would check in the show notes first before you send off an email to that other address I just mentioned. So, first things first, the strain gauge. I've heard that some airplanes, I think the one that I heard about was some kind of a wide-body airplane that had those strain gauges installed, and I thought, wow, that just makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's going to give you your actual center of gravity and weight and balance data. But for some reason, they took them off that particular airplane. And I don't know why we don't have that system installed in modern airplanes, at least, as you said, Ray, as a check and balance, so that you can compare it with the calculated figures by the load planners and to see if you're in that safe envelope. But I don't know. I do not have a good answer for you. I ask the same thing, Ray. Why don't we use that system? It just seems that would make sense. Maybe maintaining the system is just too expensive. Maybe it's too much to buy initially. I don't know. But I agree with you. It just seems like it would be a good safety feature to have that installed, at least as a check and balance. The rudder control inputs. Okay. You're correct. The way you're thinking about all of this, Ray, is correct when it comes to a tail engine-mounted, tail engine-mounted, whatever, airplane, such as the Mad Dog, the 727, airplanes that have those configurations, that the center of gravity is further back, closer to the tailplane, than on the airplanes like the 767, the 757, the Airbuses, etc. And you would think that, and I was kind of a little bit perplexed when the listener mentioned that they could really feel the control inputs back there from the rudder. But you would think that up toward the front of the airplane, because the moment arm is so long to the center of gravity as compared to the moment arm from the center of gravity back to the tail, that you would just feel a lot of yawing movement. And the reason why you don't is that because that yaw damper system that I'd talked about on a previous episode is active all the time, and it's constantly sensing with accelerometers the yaw motions, and that little rudder on the rudder kind of dampens the whole thing out magically and automatically. And so it just does such a great job that you never feel that. The only time you're going to really feel, and I've had a situation where the yaw damper stopped working, and then all of a sudden, just the slightest movement of the rudder really dramatically made the front part of the airplane really move side to side, and it was very uncomfortable, very unnerving actually. And so yeah, you're right in the way you're thinking, that you would most likely really feel the yaw forces a lot more, but you don't, because that yaw damper is working so well. Now, on the airplanes that have the wing-mounted engines and the center of gravity much further forward, if you're sitting in the back, you're going to experience much more of that yaw, even with an active yaw damper, because you have, again, that moment arm is long, and you have the wing-mounted engines, which is complicating or compounding the problem of the yaw. And so you get into a situation where you have some turbulence in that kind of an airplane and you're sitting in the back, you really feel that rudder moving around and the yaw damper trying to dampen the whole thing out, as opposed to an airplane like mine that has the tail-mounted engines. Even sitting in the back, you really don't. It's pretty solid, very solid, in fact. So you're not losing your mind, Ray. You are correct. And I don't know why the comment was made about feeling the rudder inputs more than they would feel it in a wing engine mounted airplane. But my anecdotal experience matches yours. The tail mounted engine airplanes seem to be much more stable in the yaw axis. Now, I'm not an aerodynamic professor. I know there are some people that listen to the show who know a lot about aerodynamics, so perhaps they can chime in and say and straighten this whole thing out for us, Ray, and explain to us why it is that being up in the cockpit or in first class on a Mad Dog isn't a wild ride. So, and then what was the last thing? The video of the improper loading, and it's a video of a 737 at the gate in Atlanta, and it's a 900 model. The 737-900 has a propensity to rotate on its own, I guess, because that thing is so long, and if they don't do it correctly, the tail will go down and the nose will go up. And so I'll put the video in the show notes. You can watch it. It's kind of funny. But I'm sure that there was probably some damage sustained because the front loading door, the forward cabin door, was open, and it started going up and probably impinged upon the jetway, and I'm sure that that may have caused some damage. Another side note, the 727 was very sensitive when it comes to loading, and in fact, the air stairs on the 727 were required to be lowered and in the down position, and they were actually structurally firmly connected to the ground and that helped aid in keeping the airplane from tipping while loading. So when passengers were getting on the airplane and walking toward the back, that the thing didn't tip on its tail because the air stairs were down, providing that support. Many of us who flew the 727 when we moved over to the Mad Dog thought that it was also a requirement that the air stairs must be down before you loaded on the Mad Dog, but it's not the same because that air stairs system on the MD-80, MD-90, Boeing 717 doesn't even have an air stair, but on the 88 and the 80 series and the 90 series, you don't have to have the air stairs down. They're not a structural component. In fact, they go down to a certain point, and then the bottom half of that is just like sometimes not even connected to the ground. It's not a structural. It's not a kickstand keeping the airplane from tipping on its tail. And I don't think that the way that the main landing gear is situated and the center of gravity and everything else it's never a factor on the Mad Dog. So thank you again, Ray, for your commentary and your questions. Do appreciate it. Let's listen to some more audio feedback.
Captain Jeff, my name is Zena, and my husband Mike and I are new listeners to your podcast, and we love it. We live in Port Orange, Florida, just south of Daytona Beach, near the Daytona Beach International Airport. I'm not in the aviation field at all. I'm actually an elementary school media specialist, and I'm working on my doctorate in education. I actually have 2 more years to go. But we have always been avid travelers, and I have flown on many a plane and have always enjoyed sitting on the wing seat. It's always my favorite place to sit. And on my way home from work, I often see planes landing, which is always a fun sight to see. I wanted to leave some audio feedback with you and listeners in the APG community about an event that is coming to the Daytona area, in case there are any listeners out there who live in this area or anyone who will be in this area, coming up on October 11th and 12th. It's the Wings and Waves Air Show, which is sponsored by Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, which is here in Daytona Beach. It takes place on the beach side, in front of the Hilton Daytona Beach Oceanfront Resort over the ocean. The best part about it is that it's free. Mike and I will be there to enjoy the aerobatics, and we will hopefully get some audio feedback to send in to you so that you and your listeners can hear the planes. Until then, though, Captain Jeff, thank you so much. We really enjoy your podcast. It's very informative, and we find it very interesting, especially since we do not come from the aviation field. We really look forward to your next episode. And by the way, if anyone wants to read more about the Wings and Waves Air Show, there is a website. It's wingsandwaves.com. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again.
Thank you, Zena, for informing us about the Wings and Waves Air Show. That's the hotel that we stay in, by the way, when we have layovers in Daytona Beach, that Hilton right there on the beach. I wish that I had a layover there this weekend so I could watch the show and meet you and your husband, Zena. But, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm heading out to California, the other coast. But, hey, if anybody's lives down in that area and you have listened to the show in enough time, because I'm recording this on the 9th. I'll release this tomorrow on the 10th, hopefully. And so it'll be pretty short notice, but it's going on the 11th and 12th. And I'll have a link that Zena mentioned in the show notes. Again, thank you for your audio feedback. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening, and good luck with your doctorate program? Doctoral? Something like that. Okay, Mike Smith writes, hello from Boston. In Airline Pilot Guide 136, a listener asked if aircraft had autopilots that would descend if the pilot was incapacitated. In fact, yes, the Cirrus aircraft autopilots now have that function available. It's called Hypoxia Check and Automated Descent Mode. And then he has a link here to an aviationpros.com article about the announcement from Cirrus, and it was announced in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, at the big air show there in 2010. So that was 4 years ago when they announced this, and it's part of their Perspective, Cirrus Perspective by Garmin avionics suite. And again, as Mike Smith mentioned, it's called the ADM mode, Hypoxia Check Automated Descent Mode, hypoxia recognition and automated altitude step-down recovery in the case of an unresponsive pilot. And I think what happens is that, I thought I had that in here. Apparently I forgot to include that. But from what I remember and reading the article about how the system works, if it's activated, it will require, it'll put some kind of a message on your flight avionics display saying, are you still here? You know, the autopilot's on, it's been flying for a while. If so, you know, if you're still conscious, you know, tap this button or do some kind of a physical action, which basically cancels the whole thing. And then if it doesn't get a response for a certain amount of time, it does it again. And then if it, I think for a third time, you don't take the appropriate action that it's asking you to perform, then it goes, okay, well, you must be unconscious because you're not responding, so I'm going to go ahead and start descending to a lower altitude, and hopefully the air will be such that you'll regain consciousness and everybody will be happy. It'll be a happy ending. So that's pretty cool. So Cirrus apparently has been doing this for a few years. And then let's see, another listener, corporate pilot David, I believe. Where are you, David? Thought I had you in here somewhere. Also sent me some email. Where did you go? Well, I know it was from you, corporate pilot Dave, and you mentioned that certain airplanes out there in the corporate aviation world have systems that will do this same kind of thing. Falcon Jet, the Falcon 7X, has something called the Automatic Descent Mode, ADM, and essentially, in case of a depressurization at high altitudes, the autopilot and autothrottle will guide the aircraft to a safe altitude at maximum velocity. ADM is activated when the autopilot is engaged, the aircraft is above 30,000 feet, and the cabin altitude is 9,700 feet or greater. When it's activated, the aircraft turns 90 degrees to the left, so get it off the airway. Autothrottle will auto-engage if required and reduce thrust to idle. So if for some reason you have the throttles off, they will automatically engage and then pull the power back to idle. It will descend at a speed of 10 knots less than VMO, MMO, which is the max operating airspeed and max operating Mach. At 15,000 feet, or 15,000 feet is placed in the altitude pre-select window, and then ADM is enunciated in the center of the flight management panel, and upon reaching 15,000 feet, the aircraft maintains 250 knots. ADM remains active until the autopilot is disengaged. Okay, so that's kind of another kind of fail-safe system if the autopilot system is on, which it usually is at cruise altitude, especially above 30,000 feet. And I read another article or a forum discussion about this, and I guess some of the Gulfstreams also have this capability. So what do you know? It was a great idea. Whoever suggested that there should be a system that would do this, well, there are, I guess. So very, very interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Mike and David, for letting us know. We appreciate it. Okay, now, need to find my place here. Let's go with this.
Hey, Captain Jeff, it's Mike down here in Florida. I heard you're running a little low on feedback and I haven't sent you anything in a while, so I thought I'd throw two quick questions at you. The first question is, does Acme have any written or unwritten rules on how long they want you to stay on the airframe that you're trained on? Let's say, for example, you got your dream 747 gig, but after a few months you've discovered that it wasn't all it's cracked up to be. How long before you can move back to the Mad Dog or something else? I would think the company spent a lot of money training you, and they would at least get a few years out of you on it, or you just wait till the next bidding cycle. My next question is kind of stupid, but it does have my curiosity. When Acme posts your schedule, is the time in Eastern Time, local time, or Zulu time? That's all I got for now. Catch you later.
Okay, the first question first. Yeah, it does make sense, right? They spend a lot of money on our training, and you said, well, or would you have to wait till the next bid comes out for airplanes? Well, sometimes these bids come out every couple months, so if that were the case and you had the seniority to go to something else, you could get trained on something and then, within a couple months, then you move on to something else. So that wouldn't really benefit the company at all. And so it's usually an agreement between the union or representative entity of the pilots and the company. They get together and say, if somebody upgrades to this airplane, we want them to fly it for X number of months or years or whatever. And at Acme in general, that time is 2 years. So if I put in a bid for let's say the 737 and was awarded it and I went through training, I'd be kind of locked on it for a couple of years. Now there are some exceptions for different things, and if it's one of those kind of airplanes that you could move to a different category, but it wouldn't be like a major change in the airplane. You just have to go through like a little tiny bit of training, then it may only be like a year lock. But in general, it's a 2-year time frame, and that's, of course, to keep people from moving constantly and costing and wasting a lot of the airline's money. So that is you're right. You sensed that there should be some kind of a lock-in period. And again, at Acme, as far as I know, I think it's 2 years. And the second question you asked was regarding the times. When you get, and I'm assuming you mean like my rotation, my trip pairing, or whatever you want to call it. Every airline uses a different term. But basically, the thing that tells us, what time we leave and the flights operate, and what you're doing on day 1 and day 2 and day 3, and that's all in local time. It's not based on just Eastern time or Central time. I mean, that would be difficult if you did international and everything was based on Eastern time, but you're in Rome or England or whatever, and the time change would be a huge thing. People would be messing up those time changes all the time. So they always make it at your local time. So if I fly from Atlanta to, let's say, Phoenix, and they're in the Mountain time zone, or Pacific, actually Mountain Standard. Well, they're always on Mountain Standard, aren't they, in Phoenix? But let's say it's a 2-hour time change. The schedule on my rotation or my trip pairing will show us landing at their local time in Phoenix, not what time it is in Atlanta. So sometimes it's kind of odd, because you'll look at a flight from Atlanta to Pensacola and you go, wait a minute, we're taking off at 3 o'clock, but we're landing at 3 o'clock. How can that be? I know it's a longer flight than that. And that's because you're going from, Eastern time zone to Central time zone. So that's the way it works. And it was a good question. So thank you, Mike in Florida. All right. Here's some more audio feedback. This is a fun one.
Okay, I guess we're live. So I went to your website and got the SpeakPipe, and here's why. I am a medium time listener, first time caller. I live in New York. My home airport is JFK, whoop whoop, represent. But like a lot of Brooklyners, I live under the approach route for LaGuardia. And so pretty much anytime I look up in the sky, there are jets queuing up to land at LaGuardia. And especially like if I'm in Flushing, it's a lot of fun, or in Woodside, because they're just a couple 100 feet overhead. And yeah, it's a great time. And I see a lot of I mean, Acme Mad Dogs flying overhead. So that's a good look. Anyway, my question. What is up with pilots kind of demurring on whether they want to do a flare? Like, is the flare just for vanity, basically? I understand that you're trying to touch the back landing gear wheels to the runway first without striking the tail. And when I see these beautiful Airbus approaches in good weather where they have the auto trim and everything, they just sort of float and then dance the back wheels down to the runway and then stay on the back wheels until the spoilers deploy and then derotate the nose. But sometimes I'll be driving on the Grand Central under the approach route to LaGuardia, and I'll watch a Mad Dog come in, and it's barely flared, and it looks like a paper airplane that somebody just flung across the runway, and basically all four wheels touch at once. So my question is, why do I see some aircraft with a big flare and others with hardly any? Why do I see some of the same aircraft type in similar weather conditions for the same runway, sometimes flared in a big way, otherwise not very much? And why do I see some pilots, you know, from Gowanus, Brooklyn, 4 miles away that are already flared, whereas sometimes I'll be close to the runway threshold and I'll see some pilots that are practically nose down, just hundreds of feet from the runway? Does that have to do with flap settings? Is it really just a personal taste thing, like how comfortable a pilot is with rotating the nose? Why do you guys do the flare? How much of it is necessary? And if it's necessary, why don't pilots just commit and do it all the way? And if it's not necessary, why are they messing around with it? Hope this wasn't too long.
Oh, what happened?
Hey, it's Nate from Brooklyn again. My speak pipe cut me off, and if I had to guess, I would probably say it was related to the size of my cloud storage. Anyway, I didn't want to go before letting you know again that the show's been awesome. My usual diet of podcasts is like Joe Rogan and business podcasts. So the APG is like this wonderful meditative stretch of 2 or 3 hours where I can just kind of zone out and not think about my everyday life. And by the way, I love to travel and fly too. So you like that? I got some wonderful background noise here in Brooklyn. Anyway, so appreciate you answering my feedback and wishing you clear skies and all the customary combinations of tailwinds and visibility that you guys dig. All right, talk to you soon.
Thanks, Nate. Great feedback. Well, you're funny. I really got a chuckle out of your comments. Okay, so I think the reason why the first speak pipe thing cut off was because I think you only have like a limited amount of time, and I think it went for almost 4 minutes, which I didn't think you could go that long. So hey, yay, good on you. But I'm glad you called back and finished it up. So flare. What is a flare, and why? Why do we flare? When we're coming down a 3-to-1 glide path, you know, we're coming down that slide to the runway. We are maintaining. It depends on how fast you are going over the ground, and if you have a wind and headwind or a tailwind or whatever. But typically, it's somewhere about 700 to 800 feet per minute, and the landing gear of the airplane is not designed to withstand that kind of force over and over and over and over again. And like just flying it all the way down 700 to 800 feet per minute and just slamming it onto the runway. It would not be a pleasant experience. And if you've ever been in an airplane with a hard landing, you know what I mean. And a lot of times, if you did continue that constant 3-to-1 glide path all the way down 700 to 800 feet per minute, chances are the struts wouldn't be able to absorb all that energy, and you'd be bouncing back up in the air again. And that's never a good thing, because when you bounce back up in the air again, your airplane, your airspeed is continuing to decrease, and lift is like practically nothing. And guess what? That next time you come down, it's even going to be worse than the first time you came down. And it can be a big, big, big mess. So what we do is we make that transition from that 700 to 800 foot per minute descent, and we kind of round it out a little bit. We bring the nose up a little bit, or if you're, well, I'm not going to go into that. Anyway, you kind of break that descent and you decrease it to something like, 50 to 100, 200 feet per minute. I'm not sure exactly what the descent rate is at that point, but you try to make it so that when you actually touch down, it's nice and gentle. And sometimes we touch down a little bit more firmly. Sometimes we do that on purpose. Sometimes we do it because we didn't mean to, but it just happened. Landing an airplane is an art, and it's a skill, and it's experience, and all kinds of stuff all wrapped together. It's kind of like going to like a Major League Baseball player going out there to bat. Sometimes they get a base hit, sometimes they get a double or a triple, sometimes they get a home run, and sometimes they strike out. And the same thing with pilots landing airplanes. Sometimes we grease that thing on, and you almost go, are we on the ground? I can't tell. You can almost feel the wheels kind of like gently tugging and like just going, oh, okay, I'm on. They're rolling, and those are the landings we live for, and that's the home run, the grand slam. Sometimes you come in and you pound it on, and that, my friends, is a strikeout. So trust me, we never try to do that, but sometimes it just works out that way, even for the best of us. So that's why we do a flare. A flare is that breaking the descent rate to a manageable rate so that when you touch down, it's not going to make your fillings come out of your teeth. And it also helps save wear and tear on the airplane. And sometimes it even prevents the airplane from crashing. So that's what it is and why we do it. Now, you asked, why do some pilots do it beautifully, gracefully, and others not at all? Well, there are a variety of factors that affect why people flare a little bit, why people don't flare, why people flare too high. And it's, you're using your brain and all of your senses to sense the appropriate time to start your flare maneuver. You have to kind of feel the energy of the airplane. You have to look at your speed. You have to kind of gauge your sink rate, that last 50 feet. Most modern airplanes now have radio altimeters that are pointing down that tell you exactly how high you are above the runway. And so you'll hear 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, and then you'll touch down. And if that voice is saying 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, and sometimes it'll even skip. It'll go 50, 30, you know that you're rapidly approaching the runway surface and that you should probably start your flare on the early side to prevent crashing under the runway. Sometimes you'll hear 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. And if you hear that, that means you started your flare way too early. Hopefully you are landing on a very long runway because you're eating up a lot of that first part of the runway. And hopefully your airspeed has not decayed to the point where the wings finally say, you know what? I don't have enough airspeed flowing over me to produce any more lift, so I'm coming down. Gravity's going to win. And then you kind of, drop it in. You don't want that to happen. What you want is a constant 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. And then, again, depending on the situation, depending on the runway you're landing on, you make your flare. And you shift your gaze outside. You look at the end of the runway, and you kind of sense with your peripheral vision all those cues, and you try to roll that thing on. Now, LaGuardia is one of those places that a lot of people don't like landing at I hate to end a sentence with a preposition like that, at which they do not like to land because of the perceived shortness of the runways. Now, I'm not saying they're not short, but the runways are 7,001 feet long and 7,003 feet long, respectively. But you go to Washington National, which is 7,169 feet. Usually used to be less than 7,000 feet. Charleston, runway 321, is 7,000 feet long. Richmond, the shorter runway at Richmond, which you sometimes have to land on when they're working on runway 1634, the long runway, is 6,607 feet long. Philadelphia has a basically north-south runway that is used at times, 1735, that's 6,501 feet long. Those are just a few examples of some of the runways in that 7,000 foot class and under. But for some reason, those runways that I mentioned, other than LaGuardia, don't really seem as short as the ones at LaGuardia. I think it has something to do with the fact that LaGuardia has this reputation for being very difficult to land in that because of the short runways. I think it also has something to do with the fact that portions, of each runway are built on piers and they're sticking out into, Flushing Bay? So they're actually out in the water, and that gives you that heebie-jeebie kind of feeling like landing on runway 4, when you're there in Woodside and you're looking up and the airplanes are going over a couple hundred feet above you. We're looking at that touchdown zone, but we're also looking at the very far end of the runway, Nate, and that far end of the runway is sticking out into the water, and we're going, I certainly don't want to land long on this runway because I don't want to go sliding off that end of the runway and have to start swimming. Same thing with landing on runway 31, doing the expressway visual. You're doing that final turn over Flushing, New York, and you are coming in and you're looking at that touchdown zone and you're looking at the far end of the runway, and guess what? Again, that far end of the runway is on piers and it's jutting out into the water. Again, you see that cold water and thinking, I don't want to be in that water. I think it's a psychological thing that we kind of go, you have one shot at making a good landing, and then after that, you just put it on. You just plan it on. And that's the reason why you see the different flare, not techniques, but different types of flares at time. We sometimes psych ourselves into bad landings, and we don't really need to, just because of the way that whole setup looks to us. The touchdown zone, as long as we're talking about flares and everything else, the touchdown zone is that zone of the runway, or that portion of the runway that we try to land on. And on a typical airline runway, and when I say typical length is right around 9,000 feet, I think, for landing runways or landing and takeoff runways. There are some longer than that. There are some shorter. But I think it would be safe to say the average length is about 9,000 feet. So for Acme Airlines, the first 3,000 feet, that's the touchdown zone. Of course, you don't want to touch down on the brick 1, which is the very first foot of the runway, because that means you're too low over the threshold. You need to be crossing the threshold, about 50 feet or so. So probably more realistically, the touchdown zone is somewhere around 500,000 feet to about 3,000 feet. Okay, that's that zone you're shooting for. But if the runway is less than 9,000 feet long, at my airline, they say it's the first third of the runway. So if you're going to land on a 8,000 foot runway, then that's up to the 2,667 foot mark, which they really don't have a mark for that. A 7,000 foot runway would be 2,333 feet. A 6,607 foot runway, like at Richmond, the shorter runway at Richmond, that would be the first 2,200 feet of the runway. So the shorter the runway, the tighter the touchdown zone is, and the harder it is, or the more we concentrate, or the harder, it turns out to be a little bit more difficult for us to get that great landing in that first couple thousand feet. But that's what we're always shooting for. Now, when you're talking about some of the airplanes that are flaring like 4 miles away, well, that's not really a flare. A flare is that maneuver right above touchdown, somewhere in the, depending on the airplane. Some airplanes start at 50 feet, some airplanes start at 10 feet. But if you're at 4 miles out, you're not flaring. It's just that I think what you're talking about is the deck angle or the pitch angle of the airplane. And that depends on the type of airplane it is. There are some classic airplanes that had a very high nose-up attitude coming in. I think of offhand the L-1011, the DC-10 or MD-11, FedEx. If you're ever at an airport where a FedEx MD-11 is coming in, they have a very high pitch angle coming in because they're just designed to do that. On the other end of the scale is the CRJ-200 50-seat RJ that doesn't have slats on the front of the wing. So the wing doesn't really become a very slow speed wing. They do have flaps, but they don't have the leading edge devices on the front of the wing to kind of reshape that wing so they can fly more slowly. So they're actually coming in really, really fast for that size of airplane because they have to, because if they go too slow, then they're not producing enough lift to stay flying. So, speed is life. So they come in and they're really nose down. I mean, they almost look like if they keep that attitude all the way down, they're going to hit their nose wheel first, and you never want to do that. But they have to make that transition when they're really close to the runway from being really nose down attitude to, okay, now I'm starting my flare, and then I'm going to make it so that I touch my main landing gear down without touching the tail and without stalling the airplane. So I've never flown that airplane, but I've been told that's basically the way that works. So that's why you see some airplanes that are kind of, and then you may see an airplane kind of at a nose down attitude because they're using maybe a higher flap setting. They have more flaps out, or maybe they got a little bit high on the glide slope and they're trying to correct back to the glide slope, so they're putting the nose down to get back down to the normal 3-to-1 line. In my airplane, if we come in for a flaps 28 landing, the nose is going to be up higher, and we're flying faster, and we have more energy. If we select flaps 40, which is my preferable landing flap setting, we're flying a little bit more slowly, and we can put the nose down a little bit more. You have a better view of the runway. You don't have so much energy. So there are all kinds of reasons for why airplanes look the way they do when they're on a regular final approach and then when they're coming into flare. And I think that covered everything that you asked, Nate, I hope. To summarize, flaring is something that we must do because it would be very, very jolting if we kept that same descent rate all the way down. And that would be like a carrier landing. The jets landing on an aircraft carrier, they don't flare. They fly that thing all the way down to the deck, and they hit it hard. But those airplanes are made to do that. Transport, airline class airplanes are not. So we need to break that descent rate and have a gentle landing, hopefully. And that's why we do it. And so I hope that gives you something to think about and chew on, whatever. And if I didn't answer all your questions or not satisfactorily enough, please don't hesitate to send more audio feedback. It's very entertaining. Very entertaining. Thank you again, Nate. Okay, just quickly, Joel from Malaysia says, currently working in Singapore, just wanted to know if there was any piloting course providing financial aid to help those who dream to become a pilot since they were young. I failed many, many times for asking for financial aid from an airline or the academy. The airlines don't really provide financial aid. Academy is private, and they asked me to request from the bank. I'm seriously not giving up my dream, as this dream he's had since he's been young. He said, I would like to consult from your opinion and what is the best advice you can give me. The only thing that I can think of right offhand, Joel, and it may not help, but Carl Valeri over at the Aviation Careers Podcast, that's aviationcareerspodcast.com, which is a great podcast to listen to for anybody aspiring to do any kind of a job in the airline industry. You can go over there, and there's a section there, or you can just put /scholarships, and go direct. I'll have that link in the show notes. And you can kind of peruse there to see if there are any scholarships that might work for you. Some of them are really not a lot of money, but you can get several scholarships and add up and help offset some of the cost of training. Some of them require that you become a member of the Aviation Careers podcast to access the information there. So that's the only thing that comes to mind right now. But I have a lot of really, really great people listening to the show. And there may be one or two of you out there right now listening to me talking about this that think, hey, I have a great source or a great resource for financial aid, especially for young people in international location. And if you do, please send that information to me or send me some feedback, audio or non-audio, and I can talk about it on the show and then help out Joel and maybe some others out there who need this help. And I know there are a lot of you out there who need this help. You're not rich. And, some of these countries require, great sums of money to get anywhere in the flying world. So I feel for you, and hopefully somebody will come through for us and we'll learn more. But I'd start off by going over to the aviationcareerspodcast.com website and checking out the scholarships over there that Carl has listed. Okay. More audio feedback.
Hey, Captain Jeff. Thanks for having a great podcast. It really makes me interested in aviation. My question is, if you have to taxi for 3 hours and then you have to go refuel, and then your flight ends up being canceled, does the pilot still get paid?
Okay. Well, thank you, Jacob, for your feedback. And the answer to your question is, well, it depends. It depends on the airline. It depends on the contract that your pilot group has with the company, if they're represented by a pilot union. At Acme, we get paid whether we fly the flight or not, or if we have to go and return. Basically, as soon as we block out, we're on the time clock. And then if we were out for 3 hours and we had to taxi back in and we punch the time clock again, then that's 3 hours of pay that we get. And then if we go back out again, then we get whatever that's going to be worth as well. So, yes. Or if the flight's canceled, we are pay protected. So the airline might go, you know what, there are only like 12 passengers on this, and we got to pay all these knuckleheads. Let's just cancel the flight. Then we don't have to pay the pilots and the flight attendants, and we can save a lot of money. Well, it doesn't work like that. They're still going to have to pay us, so they have the incentive to continue to operate the flight. Now, that's kind of probably a dumb hypothetical, but that's just for illustrative purposes. Now, I had heard that there are airlines out there. I think it used to be with ValueJet or AirTran. I think this has changed, but somebody told me, and this may not be true, that if they didn't actually complete the flight segment, then they didn't get paid for it. And so I think that's true, but I'm not absolutely positive. So it depends. Depends on what airline you're flying for and what your work agreement is. But I think most airlines will protect you if you have to come back or the flight's canceled. They'll still pay you for that. I think that's fair. Okay. Nick writes, Nick Carson, quick question for you regarding startups on T-tailed aircraft such as the MD-88, ERJ, 135, 140, 145, etc. Since the engines are so much closer to the APU on T-tailed airplanes, when on startup, do the engines start up faster compared to aircraft where the engines are not near the APU? This is obviously, this doesn't include ASU usages. Thanks for your awesome podcast. Well, thank you, Nick. And I hope my question is not too stupid. It's not too stupid at all, Nick. That seems to make sense, doesn't it? That since the APU is back there with the engine, so the pipe that goes to the engine's probably pretty short. So, but honestly, maybe it's like a fraction of a second faster. Getting the air to the engine starters is faster, but that pneumatic air is under such high pressure that it travels so fast that it's almost imperceptible. The difference between wing-mounted engines and engines mounted on the back, on the tail, I've never noticed it. I've never gone, oh, look, I hit the start switch and it's taking forever to start spinning. That must be because the APU is so far away. No, it's insignificant, I would say, because, again, that APU air is very, very high pressure. It's traveling very, very fast in those pipes, those tubes. So not really perceptible, at least not to me. But it's a good question. Good question. Bruce writes, thank you so much, Captain Jeff, for recommending Children of the Magenta, that fitting title describing the childlike dependency that some pilots have for the magenta-colored symbols on their automated instrument panels. Captain Warren Vanderberg coins this phrase during his famous lecture. As I watched him, I was struck by his amazing teaching ability, his humor, his gestures, and his fluency. There was something more. There was a conviction in his words and a desire to reach the hearts of the pilots sitting before him. And I agree with you 100%, Bruce. The video should be required viewing for every pilot and should be reviewed every year. And again, I agree with you 100%. It seems to me that pilots are good at entering information into the automated systems, but not so good at understanding their response. Captain Vanderberg highlighted that familiar phrase among pilots, what is it doing now? We need an interpreter, a mediator between man and machine. Would the Airbus tragedy in the Atlantic have happened if a computerized voice had said, disregard speed indicators, pitot tube blockage likely, and disconnect autopilot and autothrottles, maintain 3-degree pitch, and 65% N1. In my opinion, this would not be difficult to achieve as we already have this type of capability in car sat-nav systems where we must keep our eyes on the road and are directed by a voice. Anyway, that's my 2 pennies worth. Keep up the good work, Captain Jeff. Yours sincerely, Bruce, the Sim Captain. And, well, Bruce, on the face of it, it seems like that would be a good idea. However, a system like this would require reliability for you to, rely upon it. And when you think about the Airbus Air France 447 tragedy, the auto-flight system was fully engaged and it experienced the airspeed fluctuations and lack of airspeed information momentarily. And it said, oh, I don't know what to do with this. I'm giving up. So the system wasn't smart enough to say, oh, well, this doesn't really make logical sense that all of my airspeed indications are showing erroneous readings, or at least 2 of the 3 are showing erroneous indications. And maybe I should conclude that the most appropriate pitch would be this, and the power setting would be this, and blah, blah, blah. And then the autoflight system wouldn't have disengaged at all, and they would have been in Paris enjoying their lattes and whatever else you enjoy, and their pastries and everything else. Everybody would be alive. So to me, it's like a little bit of a, to have a system to tell you what to do when the system failed is kind of like, I don't know if it makes sense to me, because the system failed. And if you had a system to tell you what to do when the system fails, it just, you see what I mean? It just seems like not logical to me. But what I can say, and what I think is logical, is that the fact that every single pilot should understand control performance. We should all know that if the autoflight system gives up, that I set my pitch at 2.5 degrees nose high, I set my power at 82%, and it should give me the performance that I'm expecting. you know, 0 degrees pitch, this power setting or fuel flow should give me a 3-to-1 glide path, fully configured for a landing airplane, for an ILS approach. We have all these pictures and power settings available to us in the cockpit in a document, but I think you have to have some of these control settings memorized in your head. You have to pay attention when tomorrow when you're piloting your airplane and the autoflight system is flying that airplane, look down and see what it is that it's doing. Oh, okay, I'm climbing. Power's about 90% N1. The pitch is about 13 degrees nose high. We're at this weight, at this altitude. Look, I'm seeing the control instruments, and I'm seeing the performance that I'm getting from this scenario. Remember that, because you have to know that. You can't wait until you've lost your autopilot. You're in the weather, and you're in turbulence. That's not the time to look over to your fellow pilot and say, would you dig out the operational data manual and go to that page that tells me what picture I'm supposed to be looking for and flying and what power setting I'm supposed to. It's too late by then. You could lose control of the airplane. You have to know it. You have to know it. So that is what keeps airplanes from crashing, not the automation, not some voice saying, disconnect autopilot and autothrottles, maintain 3-degree pitch and 65% N1. No, your own little voice in your head should be saying, disconnect autothrottle and autopilot, maintain 3 degrees pitch, set 65% N1. See what I mean? It's the autopilot, the brain, the computer that's up here in your noggin. You got to know that stuff. So that's my take. That's my 2 cents on it. Thank you, Bruce. J.R. Pagia, I hope I pronounced that right, J.R., sent me some feedback, and he sent me a picture, a photo of his experience. Well, here, let me read what he says. Just wanted to let you know that I continue to enjoy your podcast. I appreciate your dedication and effort producing it. As I alluded to in my previous feedback a few weeks ago, I really enjoy the vicarious perspective from your side of the cockpit door. Well, thank you, and that's really the main or one of the main reasons why I do the show. So thank you for validating that, JR. Being entertaining and educational, you're a regular companion not only on my long weekly drives between San Jose and my new job in Visalia, but also on my most recent hop across the Pacific. See attached. Okay, it isn't Singapore Suites class, but I hope you don't mind slumming it in Cathay's first class. He also sent me a couple links to some YouTube videos that he'd put together. Very well done. And enjoyed watching them. Thank you, JR. And I'll include this picture of you slumming it in the Cathay first class cabin. And one of the best parts of this picture, I think, is that on his table, his very large table, 3 windows in his little compartment area, fresh flowers in a little vase on the side wall of the airplane, a glass of what looks to be champagne, looks like a champagne flute, and on his iPad or tablet device is my podcast playing. My little avatar there. So thank you, JR, for sending me the feedback. Again, enjoyed watching the videos. I'll have the picture and the links to those YouTube videos in the show notes if anybody else so desires to be jealous of JR. How are we doing on the time? Oh, it's already 2 hours and 20 or so. Let's see, how are we doing here? Boy, I still have a lot more to go. Mike, our law enforcement officer helicopter pilot, sent me a quick picture from his phone, and the title of his text to me is Mike 1, Bird 0, and it's a picture of the front of his helicopter with the remains of what looks to be a rather large bird. So he had a little bird strike, and I asked him how that all went down, and he said that they were kind of circling around, and they were going about 50 knots, and the thing hit the nose and then flew up into the rotors, and he said the worst part of it was just the cleanup. So thanks, Mike. Got to watch out for those B1RDs. Eric writes, I wanted to send you some feedback today because I started my private pilot license this past weekend. Yay! And my instructor let my girlfriend, Robin, come up with me for my lesson last Saturday. It was incredible, and I thought you'd be happy to know that your podcast has motivated me even more in the pragmatism department. In other words, I can now say I am pursuing my private pilot's license. Yay! I should have the applause button up here, shouldn't I? So that here we go. That's the airline pilot guy. Audience applauding your pursuance of your private pilot's license. Anyway, your show, and a coworker of mine named Bob, who I've also told about your show, is also an aviator and a sailor, and we share many similar interests. I think that just talking about flying and listening to the show has pushed me further into it. So thank you, Captain Jeff, and thank you, Robin, for her birthday gift to me, which she gave me in Jamaica, where I took her on vacation, which was my first 2-hour lesson. Awesome. Way to go, Robin. I had another item for you. One of the airplanes that my mother worked on in her 35-plus year career as an Acme flight attendant, the Mad Dog, a.k.a. MD-80, or as she called it, the Super 80, that's what they call it at American, was one of the planes that she was certified to work on and had a complaint. She said it was a plane that, actually the Super 80 appellation or name, actually I think came from McDonnell Douglas when they were, and I think American was the launch customer, and I think that that was actually McDonnell Douglas that came up with the name Super 80, but American continued to refer to it as a Super 80. Okay, so going on. She said it was a plane that people frequently got sick on. She told me that for this reason, she preferred to work on the 727 since the two planes were similar to her. You've said many times that you're a big fan of the MD-80, and I'm sure you're right. I'm just wondering if you ever heard that. Thank you for the show and for your time. Tailwinds, clear visibility, and smooth flying for you. My best, Eric. He says, Coffee Fund donator, thank you. Private pilot and training, awesome. And flight simulator hot dog. All right. Well, thank you, Eric, for your feedback. And regarding the comment about the Mad Dog making or getting people sick, I have not had that same experience. Now, the Mad Dog, the MD-80 series and 90 series, is not the best airplane I've ever flown. In fact, if you ask me, if you've listened to the show, you know that I put on a higher pedestal the 727 and the L-1011. But I still think that the Mad Dog's not a bad machine, really. Once you know what its quirks are and you know how to work around them. But as far as people getting sick, no, I've never. My anecdotal experience have never noticed that at all. So I'm not sure why she said that. But if I were your mom, if I had to choose between the MD-80 and the 727, I'd choose the 727 too. So thanks again, Eric. Good luck with your training.
Hey, Captain Jeff. This is Captain Bob, the Sea Captain from Connecticut. Just wanted to relay a story. Something happened to us a year or so ago. We were flying out of Bradley, heading towards Fort Myers with a change in BWI. And we're trying to get out of Bradley quickly because there was a storm front, severe storm front coming in, and they wanted to get the plane off the ground before the bad weather hit. So at any rate, we got off, no problem, landed at BWI to change planes. And I take the aisle, my wife takes the window, hopefully the middle seat stays empty, but in this particular case, a woman came and sat down. Except I noticed when she sat down, she had 4 stripes on her uniform. So I found out that she was a captain of the airline, deadheading to her, I guess, her home station, her home airport. And I wanted to ask her what, in her career of being a captain for 10 years, was the most exciting day or thing that's ever happened to her. And she said, this morning was the most exciting. And I said, what happened? She said, well, she was flying from West Palm to Islip, Long Island, and that weather front that we were trying to get out of Bradley and miss, we did get out, but she ran smack into it. And she said that when they were landing in Islip, the turbulence was so bad, it knocked off the autopilots, so they had to fly by hand. And she said she got down to 2,000 feet and just couldn't hold it, and aborted the landing and rerouted from Islip back to BWI because that was the closest airport with a major hub where they could facilitate the passengers getting all reconnected, etc. So I thought that was pretty exciting for her to say it was that morning. It was amazing. So I was wondering, Captain Jeff, from your experience, have you ever had anything like that where you've had to come down to, say 2,000 feet or so and abort the landing and not just do a go-around, but then divert to another airport? And one interesting thing I asked her, when you decide to abort the landing and not do a go-around, in the back of your mind, safety is important, but do you ever think anyone, the chief pilot or anyone, is going to second-guess your decision based on the actions you took? And she said, not for a second. She said, safety comes first, and we don't even hesitate. So at any rate, figured you might find this interesting along with the listeners. So take care and look forward to the next episode.
Well, thank you, Captain Bob. And why didn't you fly Acme? I know which airline you flew if you went from Bradley to... I'm just kidding. I'm not going to give you a bad time about that. Has that ever happened to me? I've had a couple situations where I've had to execute a miss or a go-around procedure, but in every case that I can think of off the top of my head, we were able to come back around and actually land at the original destination. But I have also diverted because of various things, usually weather. But usually that happens because you're approaching the airport, and the weather there is bad, and you're holding at a fix some distance away from the airport. And then finally you get to the point where you determine that you have reached your bingo fuel. Remember in the last episode, and Captain Olson, his app Bingo Fuel. We talked about the term bingo fuel and how that's calculated, and what things you have to keep in mind. Well, at some point you go, you know what? We're down to that fuel state where it's time for us to make the decision to go to our destination alternate and then land. So I've had to do that a few times. I'd say maybe once or twice a year that happens, or maybe just once a year. Not that often. I've not had quite that same experience that she's had where the weather was so bad, they gave it a shot and then they had to divert after having to do a miss. And I hope I never have to, but it could happen at any time, and we're all trained to do it. And very interesting that when you asked her the question, it happened to be something that just happened with her. Or maybe it was just so fresh in her mind that she couldn't get it out of her head. But really cool, and that's the best that I can recall for you. So thanks again, Captain Bob, for your feedback. And let's see. Brian in Papua, Indonesia writes, first, hi, long time no feedback from me. I've been laying low because you have so much feedback, but I wanted to respond to a listener feedback about the GA8 Airvan. You said it was, or the listener said, yeah, it wasn't me. I don't know. I've never seen a GA8 Airvan, as far as I know. The listener said it was a recip version of the Cessna Caravan. And Brian says, it is not. The GA8 Airvan is made by Gippsland Aero and is quite a bit smaller than the Caravan. There is no recip version of the Caravan. Sorry, I shouldn't be offended, but I love my Caravan, and I just wanted to set the record straight. Your friend, Brian in Papua. So, Brian, I think that the listener may have taken a little bit of license there, and maybe he was trying to explain it in, well, it's sort of like a Caravan, but it's not, and it has a reciprocating engine. But I didn't know any better. I didn't know what a GA8 Airvan was, so Hopefully I didn't upset you too much, Brian. Speaking of Brian, and I mentioned this before, great interview on the Aviation Careers podcast, episode number 67, entitled Bush Flying as a Mission Pilot, The Real Story with Brian Pottinger. And you'll see the link in the show notes. And excellent. You should listen to it. Brian's a great pilot and a very interesting discussion with Carl. And then, and speaking of the Aviation Careers podcast, APG listener and fellow aviation podcaster Tom Wachowski, I think, answers questions on episode number 69. And that's entitled How to Prepare for Flight School and Flying Over 60. Tom, I didn't think you were that old. No, he's not. Again, I'll have the link to that in the show notes. And by the way, Tom has his own website and podcast, Private Jet Podcast at privatejet.com, I think. I'll figure that out and put it in the show notes for you. And he's into all kinds of things. He has something, the Pilot Jobs book or something like that he produces, and helps you to do your resume and interview tips and all kinds of stuff. He's a wonderful speaker. Check it out by heading over to the Aviation Careers podcast. I'll put a link in there also for that Pilot Jobs book. I think that's what it's called. So, Tom, man, you're knocking it out of the park. Great job. I mean, an amazing job on Aviation Careers podcast with Carl Valeri. Wow. It's so nice that I have so many professionals out there like Tom and Brian and others that are speak so well, and they're such great people. So, speaks well of our profession, I'd say. So, keeping the pro and professional, right? Okay. Glenn writes, I'm really trying to get as many pieces of feedback as I possibly can here. And I think that I'm just going to keep going. I'm hungry and I'm thirsty, but I'm making the sacrifice for you, my dear listeners. Yes, the things that I do for love. And I do. I love you all. Thank you. Glenn writes, thanks for your show. I have found them to be very informative and very helpful, even if I'm not a real pilot, but a learning simulation flyer. I respect that even though simulations are quite realistic to a point, and even if it doesn't reflect the real thing, I was hoping that you could clear some things up for me on flight routes. You see, I use X-Plan on my MacBook Pro, and I have sort of understood that you use a flight management computer, FMC, to input your flight routes, right? Yes. Well, I sort of got that, and I even programmed it into the FMC okay enough, but the arrival is the one that baffles me the most. Assuming you approach the runway correctly, for example, towards the runway into the wind, but the last leg just pinpoints the runway and doesn't lead you onto the runway, if you get what I'm saying here, I assume that there are some other points you have to enter to turn into the runway, and if this was the case, where do you get all these fixes and codes from? Okay, yeah, so that last stage, you're coming in, you have the en route course route put into your flight management computer. You've probably put in your arrival procedure, your standard instrument arrival procedure, your STAR. But that gets you so far. But you need something that's called an approach procedure. You have to put that into your FMC, and for that particular runway. And a generic approach that we use very often is called an ILS approach, an instrument landing system approach, or an RNAV approach to that particular runway. And that's going to give you fixes all the way down to the very end of the runway, and altitudes and glide paths and stuff like that. Now, how do you figure all that out? Now, I'm not a PC simmer, so I'm not exactly sure if this is going to be the best answer for you, but this is the best that I can come up with off the top of my head. But I know that I have a bunch of PC simmers out there that are going, oh, I know the answer to this. And if you do, then, and if I say the wrong thing, then please, write or send audio feedback and correct me. But I was thinking, what I would do, Glenn, if I were going to fly from, let's say, Atlanta to, I don't know, St. Louis, I would go on to flightaware.com, and then I would do a search for a flight that went from KATL to KSTL. And then I would look, and there's a little flight information box on the right side of the web page that shows you the most likely route, or the programmed route, or what the word I'm looking for is escaping me, the filed route. And it gives you the departure, it gives you the en route jetways and fixes, and it gives you the standard instrument arrival procedure, and it also, well, it doesn't give you the actual approach, and that's something you're going to have to do on your own. But, by looking at the weather, you can kind of figure out which way they're landing. And let's say they're landing on 30 right. Okay, well, the next thing I would do is go to www.airnav.com. There might be some other places for this. Airnav, AIRNAV.com. And then there you can do searches for instrument approaches and arrival procedures and all that kind of stuff. And then you can actually get the PDF document of the approach. And then once you have the name of the approach, then you can plug that into your flight management computer, and I think you'll be set. I could be wrong about that, but that's just my sense of how you would do it. So, continuing with Glenn, another issue I have is when I go to the sites to get flight codes, I don't know what the difference is between fix and VOR, and so on. And I am assuming that APT is airport, as it always recognizes that, and most fixes work, but some fixes don't. All I can tell you that a fix is a position in the sky which is reached by an aircraft following a specific route. It can be a nav aid, like a VOR. A VOR really is a fix, or it can, which is a navigational aid on the ground, or it could be a location in space just identified by latitude and longitude, and it's just an arbitrary point in space. But a fix, again, it's a position in the sky reached by an aircraft following a specific route. It could be that the fixes that don't work are not in your simulator database, maybe. I don't know for sure. I mean, I know that on the airplane that I fly, Glenn, if I put in a fix and it goes, no such fix is recognized or whatever, I know that that's not in the database of my flight management computer. Doesn't mean that the fix isn't really there. It probably is, but it's just not in my flight management computer. So that's my best guess for that. And then the last question you might not be able to answer, but I'll ask anyway, in case you may know it anyway, and that is, once you have the flight routes programmed into the FMC, how do you lock that onto an autopilot? When I was simulating with the 737, I had a switch you could press once on autopilot and it would follow it, but on the 787 Dreamliner, I can't find this anywhere. I don't know on the 787 where the switch would be. That's a Boeing autoflight system interface, and I'm not sure. Maybe somebody out there who flies the 787 or knows or flies the simulated version of the 787 can help. I know on the Mad Dog we have something called a flight guidance control panel up on the glare shield with push buttons to select and arm various navigation and roll modes. So if we're not on a heading and we want to couple the autopilot to the FMC route, we push nav. The flight mode enunciator panel, the FMA, would then reflect this engagement by either saying nav arm, nav cap, or nav track, indicating that you have successfully hooked up the autopilot to the navigation system. So that's the best I can do for you, Glenn. Hopefully somebody out there who is who's the guy that calls himself the captain, the sim captain? Bruce, if you're listening, help Glenn out, okay? All right, Ray, send me a short little audio feedback here. I think we have enough time to play this.
Now, does Captain Jeff have any experience?
Wait a minute, that's me.
Flying gliders? No, but I really do want to fly a glider someday.
Hey, I'm a tech. I can fix that. First step, get to 30,000 feet. Second step, shut off the fuel supply to both engines. Problem solved.
Yeah, that's what I think about that. Bray. Actually, that was very, very funny. Yeah, I've never flown a glider, so all you have to do is shut down the engines, and now you're a glider.
I have very little patience for stupidity.
Just kidding, Ray. Just kidding. Okay. I think this is going to be the last one. Carrie writes, this past weekend, I had 4 flights on Acme Mad Dogs, but was disappointed you were not upfront on any of them. I'm sorry, Carrie. My question to you comes from the 4th flight, an MD-90 from Atlanta to Charlotte. Sitting right over the baggage door just before pushback, they wheeled the belt loader back and made a tremendous amount of noise in the baggage compartment. Out came yellow sacks marked Acme Airlines and 50 pounds. I counted 24 bags, but another could have been hidden. The bags looked like mail sacks, but I actually believed they were sandbags. Were they? Is ballast required for some flights? You got it, Carrie. They are sandbags, or they were sandbags. And sometimes, usually for a short flight segment from Atlanta to Charlotte, because of the fuel load and the center of gravity and the center lift and the envelope that they're shooting for with the load planning and the passenger load and all that stuff put into the mix, the computer goes, not going to work. It's not going to be safely in that envelope. You need to put some weight up toward the front of the airplane. So I'm guessing you were probably somewhere near the front, probably near the bin 1 or bin 2, and that's where they were taking you said they actually... Now, I'm not sure if they were putting them on. I'm gathering that they put them on. And that's most likely the scenario going from Atlanta to Charlotte. But they could be taking them off as well. The flight coming in may have had those sacks in there, and now they don't need that weight up there to make the whole thing balance out right. But yes, we actually use, and all the airlines do this, sandbags to add necessary weight to make everything balance out correctly. So you were right. They are sandbags. As a side note about seat reclining, on that same flight, a deadheading captain was in the seat in front of me. In the instant between weight off wheels and leaving ground effect, the captain slammed his seat back to its full extent. Oh, well, what can I say about that except...
I have very little patience for stupidity.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sounds to me like the way you're describing this episode, that he didn't do it very charitably and was kind of a jerk. And I don't know what to say about that, except I'm sorry. But they're out there. Trust me, I've met a bunch of them. So I hope your experience is a better one next time, Carrie. And I'm sorry that it wasn't me on any of your flights. I really tried, but honestly, I didn't know that you were flying that day. So anyway, thanks for your feedback. And yeah, that is going to be it for this episode. So it looks like, Brian and Rob and another Brian, Pasadena Brian, and others there have left me more feedback. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to just wait until the next episode to answer your questions. So again, thank you for listening today to today's show. If you want to see links that I've mentioned on the show and other things like photos and that kind of thing that I've talked about, head over to airlinepilotguy.com/138. And if you want to learn more about the Coffee Fund, again, airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. If you want to see what I look like and, sitting there a talking head on video, head over to youtube.com/user/airlinepilotguy, or just airlinepilotguy. I don't think you had to put the user in there. It understands that. I'm on Facebook, Airline Pilot Guy, and Twitter, Airline Pilot Guy. Where else? If you want to know where I am when I'm out on a trip, I haven't, in September, I wasn't very good about doing it, but I'm back in the habit again, putting out the tweets on Where is Captain Jeff, WERR Let me try that again. WHEREISCAPTJEFF. Where's Captain Jeff? And you can see where I am and what flight I'm on and all. Well, not exactly the flight, but you know where I'm going. Well, whatever. You get it. If you want to send feedback at airlinepilotguy.com. Head over to airlinepilotguy.com and click on the Contact Me page, and then you can see some other options there. Use Speak Pipe like many of you did on this episode, or whatever. So that is about it. I can't talk anymore. I got to go and parch my dry throat, put some food in my tummy, and then hit the sack. So until next time, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care and God bless. Kavu to you.
Good day.